Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hi, my name is Ed Chambliss. I'm the author of A One-Legged Stool, How Shareholder Primacy Has Broken Business and What We Can Do About It. I'm going to read today a little bit of the introduction. That's a good place to get started. This is not a book for business people. It's a book about business for all people, because all of us should care deeply about business and how it's conducted. Why? Business, also known as private enterprise, is today's dominant social institution, much like the church was during the Middle Ages or the monarchy during the Renaissance. Its influence is everywhere, and it affects virtually every aspect of our lives, as it should. Business as a construct is amazing. It is responsible not only for producing most of the goods and services we need, but also for generating the income to acquire them and the free time to consume them. That's no small feat. And it's only possible thanks to the embrace of three fundamental forces: utility, specialization, and empowerment. Utility is just an economic synonym for usefulness. That is, how well a product satisfies a customer's wants or needs. The better it can satisfy a human desire, the more valuable it is, and consequently, the more a person is willing to pay for it. This basic concept drives all sorts of transactions in our society. Most obviously, commerce, but also employment, where employees exchange their skills for a paycheck and hopefully some personal satisfaction. Investing, where individuals buy stock in the expectation of a return on their investment. And communities, where governments offer tax breaks and other incentives to companies in exchange for creating jobs and paying tax revenue. Over time, humanity has been able to steadily increase the utility of all of these transactions. Products, jobs, investments, and communities have all been improved. And as a result, our quality of life has improved. This progress is due in large part to realization that no one is good at everything. Some of us are better at math. Others are better at writing. Still others are better at working with computers or making grilled cheese sandwiches or whatever. That's just the way it is. However, this diversity of talent also means that each of us has an area where we can be more useful, where we contribute more utility to the effort. So success for an enterprise comes from assembling a diverse team of specialists who can work together to elevate the overall effort by applying the increased utility that comes from their individual expertise. The result is a product with greater overall utility and therefore greater value. It's like building a stool where the height of the legs work together to collectively elevate the seat off the floor. The arrangement is good for everyone, with each of the legs helping to support the others. In fact, without this symbiotic connection, individual legs are much more unstable and likely to just fall to the floor.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. I am so excited you guys are joining us for another week, another fabulous author, and all the fun things we got going on today. So today we have the talented Mr. Ed. Hi, darling. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you today?
I am wonderful. I am thrilled you're joining us. I can't wait to dig into this book. So we're just going to jump in. So let's start with a little bit of where did this book come from and give us a little background of that.
Sure. I've been in the marketing and advertising business for about 3 decades. And over the last few decades, I've been noticing that more and more of my clients have been putting short-term needs over long-term. And it's gotten worse and worse, so that we would get together in meetings and talk about ideas that were great for their business, not only in the short term, but in the long term. We would all smile and nod our heads and say, yep, this is exactly what we should do. And then we'd all look at each other and go, but we're not going to do it, right? Right. Why? Because they have a quarterly earnings call coming up and they haven't hit their numbers and they need to pay a higher dividend or they need to show better return for Wall Street. And it became pretty clear to me that so much of the damage being done to businesses specifically, as well as our economy, are being driven by this incessant need to pay out money to shareholders now instead of investing in the future success of the company.
That is so interesting and strange at the same time because I thought the common consensus was if you had stocks in the market, you were looking at a 10-year plan. Like you were supposed to invest now in 10 years, it's going to average out to 10%, and that's how you're going to make your money. So to think about, I want the money now, this explains why we're going up and down in this crazy roller coaster we see Wall Street doing. But I could not imagine from a business perspective the pressure that it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on directors and other business leaders to keep the share price high, to increase dividends, and even buy back stock to artificially raise the price, because there are always people out there who are ready to sell. There are always people out there who are ready to dump a stock. And if you can't keep the share price high and make that income as high as possible, they're just going to walk away. So there's a lot of pressure, and they tend to yield to that pressure. I think they yield to it more than they should.
How do you maintain a successful business when you spend 90% of your time looking behind you to see what are these people going to do? Because you're not thinking of the business, you're thinking of shareholders.
Correct. I think it's interesting because as a business person, you have to keep that audience in mind. I'm not knocking shareholders. They are very valuable, but they're only one of many stakeholders that are important to a business's success. Without customers, there is zero revenue. Without employees, you can't develop or make products. And without communities, you don't have a place for your business to live. So they're all important. It's a stakeholder ecosystem that has to be fed. And I think businesses realize that to a certain degree, and they do offer products for customers and they do have employees and try to treat them well. But the need to extract money rather than creating future value is so strong, things have just gotten a little tipsy. One of those legs of the stool is a lot taller than the others nowadays, and it's bad for everybody.
I love how you put it. Things that become a little tipsy, just to put it very mildly. That's a really awesome way. You started the book by saying this book is not for business people. Why that disclaimer of all things?
I think the concept of shareholder primacy, where shareholders are more important than everybody else, is a massive belief system and it permeates every aspect of society. To a certain extent, it goes all the way around the world as other developed and even developing nations are focusing on, I need to have the most profit for my shareholders, and that's how I should judge my success. But it's so big that the only way we're really going to change it is to get everybody involved, to get people who don't work in business, people who are customers, people who are just citizens, who might even work in nonprofit or something like that, or maybe don't work at all. But this permeates our entire society. And people should care about it because it affects them. The way business harvests natural resources from the environment affects me, even if I don't work in business. The way that business increases income inequality affects everyone by transferring wealth to people who are already more well off. So these are societal and environmental changes that everybody should care about. And it's going to take all of us to change it.
There is a huge misconception in terms of what stocks is all about and how this entire system works. And it's interesting because this is perfect timing because I've been having discussions with my friends recently. You have people who are very savvy in the stock markets, and you have a whole bunch of us are going, I am so intimidated by this that I don't even want to play. But I like the perspective you talk about. It doesn't matter if you're in it, it still affects you. It is still
Absolutely.
playing a role when you looked at your book because you have touched in so many different pieces. And sometimes when we think of a business investment book, nobody's like, "Ah, I don't care if that doesn't play with me." How conscious were you to say this will hit home in so many different levels?
I really tried to write it for everybody. It's not a book for academics. It's not a book for lawyers or financial investors. Although, interestingly, they're human beings too. And they have a life outside of those jobs. So this is for the non-working person. And I don't mean that they don't have a job. I mean, this is for the part of them in their leisure when they're not taking on that role of working for a company. It affects them. And I wanted to write it in such a way that pulls together a lot of snippets and news articles and things we've all seen in our news feeds. When I talked to people, they said, yeah, I knew about this and that, but I didn't know about these other things. But when you put them together, it really begins to weave into a fabric. And I can see the trend and I can see actually what's driving this because shareholder primacy has been around for 50 years. It really started in the 1970s. And so many people have grown up in the middle of this phenomenon. This is normal to them. And yet, a lot of people in their gut, in their heart, go, this isn't quite right. This is sort of lopsided. So, my goal for them is to educate them, to share the learnings that I learned while researching this book so that they can go and have conversations with their boss, with their investment advisors, with their government, and say, this is not quite right. And here's some ideas on how we can level the playing field for everybody.
How long have you been researching this book?
I've been working on this for about 3 years. I walked away from being the CEO of an advertising agency because I had to figure this out and I didn't have the time to figure it out. So I took a sabbatical and 3 years later, I understand it. And my gut was right. Something was wrong. It doesn't have to be this way. Before shareholder primacy came into effect, the dominant business model was what was called managerialism. And it existed from 1930 to 1970. And if you think back, 1930 to 1970 is when the US became an economic superpower. Managerialism's goal was to balance all these competing interests, to recognize that they're all important. And during that time frame, wages doubled. The US economy grew by leaps and bounds, and investors actually got a 6 to 7% return on their investment, which is not shabby at all because everybody realized that all the stakeholders are important. So I want to make sure that people understand that. And that took a lot of research to fill in the gaps in my own knowledge too.
You have taken on a project that is huge and also a tad bit controversial because you're talking about what's standard knowledge and what we think supposed to be the right thing, and then you question it. That took a lot of guts. When you're questioning the status quo and you're going, it's a little off. And what most writers do is question those things in a very subtle way. It makes people kind of turn around and go like, what? How did people reacted when you said this is the book that I want to propose? How did that come across?
It's interesting. I had two different reactions. One was from people who sort of sensed the same thing and they went, oh, yeah, that sounds really interesting. But then you have other people that were defending the status quo. I use the old story of the emperor wears no clothes, that people are afraid to say that the emperor wasn't wearing any clothes, but
Mhm.
somebody steps in and finally says, he's naked. And then everybody starts to say he's naked. So I knew this was controversial, but when you believe something and you want to make the world a better place and you see that there's a problem, it's sort of my responsibility. The saying related to terrorism prevention, if you see something, say something. I saw something, I believed it. And so I invested the time to put out my best argument for it. And if it takes off, great. Then I'll know it was worthwhile. If it doesn't take off, that's still okay because it was a journey for me to go out there and further my understanding of this and get my opinion out there.
You also have a great tool to talk to your customers. You're off your sabbatical now.
Yes, I've actually started my
Okay.
own company. And rather than focusing on general marketing and advertising, I'm actually trying to help business people who feel something is wrong with shareholder primacy to help them transform their businesses so they are profitable by helping everybody.
So this is a win-win for everyone because you do have historical and empirical knowledge for the last 3 years. This is what's happening. It's not really working. And you can feel it's not working. So I think it's definitely a plus for everybody, for the people listening to us who can kind of go in, oh, I was really interested in that. But also for your future and current clients to be like, oh, that's what that pain we're feeling. Because we know there's a problem. We just don't know what the problem is. So you're giving
Exactly.
it, you have giving it a face and a name and kind of saying, let's talk about it. Let's look at it. So I love it.
Wonderful. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It is something where I want to help people identify the cause, but then the back third of the book is here's some specific steps you can do to change it too. Because I think when people do realize there's a problem, the next step is, okay, what do I do about it? Because you can't unsee the problem once you've seen it.
It's very hard to go back to that oblivious or completely like, I don't know what's going on. Because now you see it and you're feeling the pain
Right.
and you're going, what do I do about it? So you're giving them solutions, you're giving them tidbits. When you started this, did you saw this as a collection of books or just one?
I really saw it as one particular journey. It may blossom into other things down the road, but right now I wanted to get the central thesis out there. I think there's obviously a lot of different avenues when you're talking about changing the dominant business model in the entire world. That's a big area. And I think there's more to come on that, but it doesn't just have to be me. I want to inspire other people who see the same problems to get out there and share their thoughts and their beliefs. Because I think that's the only way our society works.
So, from switching a little gear away from the business side and more into the writing side, is this your first published book?
It is. It is. I've written my entire career, actually started off as an advertising copywriter, creating ads. And then I've moved into management and I'm a teacher too. So I teach at the postgraduate level from time to time. So I've done a fair bit of writing, but I've never written anything long form before. It was quite a challenge, I'll tell you that.
What was some of the things you learned about it? Because usually for brand new authors, when they're putting this baby together, there's some things that you guys learned that you're going, I never saw this before. What was that thing that hit you?
The best way I can describe it is I had this idea in my head. And in my head, it was perfectly clear and it made total sense. But my brain is multidimensional. And when you're writing a book, you have to untangle that beautiful rat's nest into a single linear exposition where it's one sentence followed by the next, followed by the next. And untangling that big ball of string and straightening it out into one line is really challenging. And there's a lot of trial and error, especially with transitions. Also, along the time, I was still adding to my knowledge. So I thought I'd have something and I'd realize, oh, I should go back and splice in this more detail to this section so it actually makes more sense. Writing the book was challenging. It was very rewarding. I had horrible days where I wrote and wrote and wrote and threw it all away. But in the end, I just tried to stay true to my beliefs and my gut and listen with that little inner voice and read it back on the screen and go, yeah, that's what's in my brain. That makes sense.
Ooh, I love it. I love the fact you're trying to translate everything you thought, everything you had learned, and put it into paper. For somebody who's not in your head, I think that's always the catch and beauty of it.
Right. And does it actually translate?
Because they're not seeing the same things you are. They're going to read it and take it from a whole different perspective. So the fact that you were very aware that this needed to translate into a linear form that they could follow, it's impressive. Are you working on anything now?
Right now, I'm working on not just getting the book out there, but also getting the thoughts out there. When I was thinking about this book is a documentation of something, but it's much bigger to me than just getting a book out there. It's about changing the world. Go big or go home, right? So if I'm going to do this, that's going to take more than just me writing a book. It's interesting. 2 days after the book was published, the US Congress had a hearing about shareholder primacy. And it was fantastic to see that the federal government was holding public hearings about shareholder primacy and really trying to favor shareholders. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? And they had both points of view on display. And I was so excited to see that healthy conversation going on in the public eye. So I reached out to Joint Economic Committee and some of the witnesses who testified and trying to align forces with them and continue the discussion so that more and more people can get involved. Because at the end of the day, this isn't for government to decide. It isn't for executives to decide. It isn't for academics to decide. It's for all of us to decide. Businesses, especially corporations, were created to serve the public. That's why they get their charter from the state government. And if they're not doing a good job of that, we need to help them with that. I look at businesses as teenagers and we are their parents. We gave them life and we're helping them grow up. And if we notice that they're misbehaving, we need to have a bit of an intervention and really help get them back on a good course. And I think that's where we are right now. They're coming into their own, and we want to help them be productive members of society.
It's a very healthy way to look at it and making sure that that entity that we have created as a society is still serving the good of the people. We still have business that are owned, and then you have public businesses. What is your take and recommendations for those businesses that are not shareholder mind? Should they actually consider it?
I think that even if you're not a publicly traded company, you really are immersed in this belief that it's all about making profit. I think my experience has been that when you are an executive or an owner of a privately held business, you have more control. You don't feel that constant pressure to pay money. Of course, not everybody. Some people are in it just to milk as much money as possible out of whatever they can. But I think there's a closer relationship between a privately held company and the owner than there is between a publicly held company and a shareholder. There's a lot of pressure in a publicly held company, but a privately owned company, it's just sort of me having a conversation with myself, especially if I'm a single member LLC. But I think there are opportunities for private business to compete. And I think that's one way that a private business can actually beat a public business is there can be more nimble and they can invest more in the future and come out and say, hey, I'm doing better for society. Buy my product over this other big behemoth corporation that is only invested in paying money to their shareholders.
Great advice for people listening. And also for our viewers who kind of going, okay, how does that apply to me if I'm not a publicly traded company? I do have a business. How can that apply? It is those conversations, and you're very adamant about starting those conversations. What advice would you give a business owner who's looking at himself and going, what do I do? How do I get myself there? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think the very first thing you have to do is decide, do you actually want to do this? Do you actually want to take the hard steps necessary to transform your business? If you decide that, yeah, enough is enough and I want to be a force for good, then the next step really is to decide how you can help humanity, how you can help human beings. Because again, when you're a company, your job is to create products and services that satisfy human needs, be it from a customer or an employee or an investor or a community. So if you can decide what you're good at and how you can best satisfy needs, then you become focused on creating a company that is all about that. I use the analogy of deciding which best friend your brand is going to be. All of us have friends, and our friends are all different, and we hang out with them for different reasons. We enjoy their company, we like their perspective, but also we all know somebody who's been to France. And if we're going to France, we might want to talk to them and find out where we should go and what restaurants we should eat at. We have people who are very good at home repair. And if we have a home repair problem, we might pick up the phone and call them. I think really deciding what best friend brand you're going to be is a huge transformation for a company because most companies focus on being the leader in the category. And the category is so not human centric at all. Human desires are rarely satisfied by one particular category. You cross industries and categories to seek total satisfaction. So I think the biggest thing you need to decide is who am I going to be? What best friend am I going to be? And then if I'm going to solve that problem, that human condition, what services and products do I need to offer to actually do that instead of just focusing on this industry definition and trying to be the best widget maker in that category?
Great advice for everybody listening and to any business who's trying to define what role do I play. Sometimes when we think about that human experience, it put things into a different context. So very, very nice. Switching gears, what advice would you give a brand new author who decides, I want to do, and it's a little different when you're doing fiction. What happens when you're doing a nonfiction book that is very centric in the real world? What advice would you tell an author?
I think there are some similarities for the limited bit of fiction writing I've done, which is you need a plan. I think the worst thing in the world is to sit down with a blank screen and just try and write. I don't think that ever works for anything long form. It's too complicated and you need to have organization. I outlined my entire book first. As I was researching it, I kept working with an outline. I'm a big fan of the program Scrivener, which is a wonderful writing platform that allows you to essentially make notes on virtual note cards and move them around a corkboard. And then when you're done, you just flesh out those bones and you have a text. So being able to organize your thoughts and also collecting all your sources and linking those to your notes and moving it around at that note taking outline stage. I think it works for nonfiction as well as fiction. Beyond that, I think you have to stay true to your beliefs. Writing a book is hard. It is frustrating. I can't tell you the number of times I backed up and erased an entire sentence and changed the format of it and or moved whole paragraphs around trying to get it to feel right. But I think you, as the author, it really is about trying to get your vision out of your head into a way that'll communicate clearly. So that's a long job. Stay with it. Believe in yourself. Trust your gut. There's a great saying, which is, my head is where rational thought lives, and my heart is where emotion lives. And if I draw a line and I do the subtraction, there's my gut. And I always trust my gut as the tiebreaker between my heart and my head. Your gut knows what you're trying to do. It can't always articulate it, but trust your gut.
All about staying authentic and being authentic to the story you're telling, the book you want to create, and who you are.
Absolutely.
So the
I
fact that you decided to stay authentic is incredible.
Thank you. It goes back to that necessity. I had to do this. I saw something, I had to say something. Otherwise, what good am I as a member of society? It'd be like if someone all of a sudden, when they're working in their garage, came up with the cure to cancer and decided, I'm not going to pursue that. There's a responsibility to being a member of society. And I talked to people when I was writing saying, look, this is either the best thing you've ever read or the stupidest thing you've ever read. There is no middle ground. And I'm okay with that because there's a chance that this could make an impact. And so far, people seem to be receptive to it. And it seems to be helping them in their own conversations. So that's great.
Informed conversations is the best thing we can create in our society because recently we are having conversations and not enough information is being out there. There's not enough facts. People are talking, but it's not validated by anything. And you're going, oh, we might want to question that.
Yes. Yes. The idea is not just to stir up controversy. Let's advance thought. Let's advance our society.
Powerful. I love it. So tell us, because you have an entire mission going, where can people learn more about it? Because this is huge. And I'm going, where can we send them if they have questions of you, for you, and about the book?
Absolutely. Probably the best place to go is the book website I've set up. It's a one-leggedstool.com. You can read the introduction for free there. I want everybody to have access to it. You can read what you heard me start earlier today. Also, you can reach out to me there at ed@a-one-leggedstool.com. Also, I'm pretty active on social media when it comes to LinkedIn, also on Twitter from time to time. So you can reach out to me there. I'd love to have a conversation. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, great. That's what it's all about. It's not about me winning. It's about us all winning by advancing the society.
It's about having informed conversations that can lead to much impactful results.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Ed, before you leave us, it's time for a lightning round.
All
Are you
right, I'm ready.
Don't think too much about these. Easy peasy. Let's see how we do. Coffee or tea?
Oh, absolutely coffee. No question.
I had tea today, so I'm going half and half. Lunch or dinner?
Dinner, you can stretch it out into a lovely conversation with your friends, easier than you can over lunch.
It's very true. You get points for that one. Early bird or night owl?
Oh, absolutely night owl. My brain needs to get going and I'm just ready to start sometimes after the sun goes down. It's a bad habit, but it works for me.
This should be an interesting one. Documentary or fiction?
Oh, documentary. As fascinating as fiction is, nonfiction is so amazing sometimes. It's so unbelievable. Documentaries are wonderful. It allows me to take little visits around the world.
That's a great way to put it. Here is a little different one. If your life could be turned into a movie, who would you like to play you?
Goodness, I have no idea. That is a tricky one because you think about who looks like me and definitely don't have to go down that route. I would like to say Ryan Reynolds. I think he brings a really irreverent wit and intelligence to things he does, especially in the Deadpool films. And if someone's going to play me, let's bring a little edge to it.
He is definitely edgy in so many different ways, and he's such a great actor. So,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mr. Ed, it is such a pleasure to talk to you. I am so excited about your book. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
I wanted to thank you for chatting with me today and to everybody who's listening to this. The last thing I'd say to everybody in the sound of my voice is the world does not have to be the way it is today. We can change it together, and that includes business. So if you don't like what's going on, stand up, say so. You have power. You have an influence. Let's make the world a better place.
I'm a strong believer that one person can make a difference. Thank you, Mr. Ed. It is
Thank
such
you.
a pleasure. To our listeners, go ahead, go check out the website, check out this book, decide to take one step into empowering your life and those around us. We had an amazing time with Mr. Ed. Thank you for coming. Has been a pleasure. Go ahead, my friends, give our episode a like, share with somebody, invite us to join us. We're always better when we're growing together. And I will see you guys next week with another amazing author. Bye.